Success is usually one of our highest priorities in work and life.
But it isn't always the easiest to achieve.
We try to move towards the goal and often give up at the first obstacles.
The problem is we focus so hard on the destination.
We want all the benefits of being on top without the hard-earned process of getting there.
It doesn't work that way.
This week's book proposes a success model that works from the inside out.
It starts with building positive self-image and investing in relationship.
Making goals and fine-tuning your attitude.
And putting in the blood, sweat, and tears to achieve your desires.
Let's crack open Zig Ziglar's book, See You at the Top.
Welcome back. You're listening to Motivation Minute, where we unravel the timeless truths in that stack of books you don't have time to read so that you don't have to. And this week's book is See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar.
Spencer, I actually saw Zig Ziglar speak before he died at a conference.
Really?
I'm actually really lucky because he was I think in his 90s, and he had some mental problems at that point. But it was really cool to be able to see him. I think it was right before he died. But he's a legend when it comes to personal development.
Wow. I did not know that about you.
Yeah. I remember my dad talking about him when I was pretty young, and he started in the 40s, I think. And in fact, in an article online, it talked about how he has very solid ideas. Some of them are a little bit old-fashioned, and how he would talk about how some of the modern culture is bad, like the Beatles. So he was around a long time.
This book was really, really good. I loved the themes about it starts within, like how you project on others is what you are inside. I loved a theme he brought up, which was, having positive self-image. That's a good thing. Like, we often look down on wanting to, feel good about how we look, because it's not really how we look, it's what we do that matters. But how we look actually determines how we perform. Like, when you dress up or find clothes that you enjoy wearing, those kinds of things can actually motivate you in a surprising way.
And I think this was also kind of a new idea, because I think you hear from, older people, and it's not a bad thing. I think they have a good point that you shouldn't, especially where I grew up in the Amish culture, and in general, in the early 1900s or whatever, people thought, it's you have to be humble, and you never look in the mirror. You don't present yourself. You just, it's prideful to want to look decent.
Right. And then this book's talking about smiling at yourself in the mirror just to get that positive self-image built up. The complete opposite.
Yeah. I've heard, you should be able to look yourself in the mirror and say that you love yourself, and that's something that's wow, that seems a little bit arrogant or something, depending on your perspective. But, it really isn't, because I think a lot of us, for me even, sometimes, especially in the past, I felt awkward sometimes looking at myself, and that's not a good thing. That shows you have low self-image if you can't even look at yourself. I mean, it's just you. There's nobody there, but if you can't feel confident by yourself in the mirror, then...
Exactly. It's a thing that many of us struggle with, just not being able to enjoy who we are. But then if we can't have the self-confidence about ourselves, then we're less likely to have confidence about others too. You can build self-confidence, the book was talking about, by looking people in the eye. And I was thinking about this because I was today at work, I just had this. I'm walking down the hallway, and when you're with at my workplace, people tend to avoid looking at each other in the eye as they're passing each other. It's that really awkward moment where what I'd actually do is I kind of look off to the side, or I see them coming and I watch them as they're further away. But as you get closer, there's that temporary short distance where you're I don't know if I should keep looking at you or not. So you kind of look at your feet as you're going through, which is what most people do, or you look at off to the side at something else, even though naturally what you want to do is say, hey, how are you? But you tend to avoid that glance. Or passing someone on the street, same way. This book was look them in the eye, which is so hard to do.
Yeah, well, I do the exact same thing a lot of times. Yeah, it's I think it shows that you're not confident if you can't even look at someone else in the eyes, at least for a little bit, and smile. I think that's if you can do that. If I think about some confident people that I know, they're always smiling. They're nice to everybody they meet. They say, "Hey, nice to meet you." It doesn't matter.
Right.
So It doesn't matter if it's a awkward person or a millionaire. They treat them the same way. Look them in the eyes, and it just shows confidence in yourself, and it also makes the other person feel comfortable.
The weird thing is if you want to look at the other people and everyone else has this atmosphere of being not confident, it's really awkward. And I'm trying to think of, like, should I just start looking at people in the eye as I pass them? Or is that just the wrong way to handle it when it's not your culture to do that? Or, I mean, what do you think? Like, is there a risk?
I don't think so. I think we're just a little bit too scared. I think it shows confidence, and if the other person thinks something, that you're being too confident or so cocky, then that's fine. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And maybe it reciprocates too.
Yeah, but generally, I think people will respond, or they'll appreciate that if they see you, if you look them in the eyes and smile. Obviously you could go overboard, but
I mean, how overboard can you go with a smile though? Like, that's just genuine, like, hey, I'm glad to be alive, glad to see you. And they're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. I mean, you could stare at them too long, and
right. And that was the differentiating factor, like staring versus, looking them in the eye. It's a little bit different. Like, it sounds the same, but it's the intent behind it. Another really cool point is that you can learn from successful failures, which is like, why would you say that? Well, the book made a point that the big shots in life are the ones that are really little shots that just kept on shooting. So you think of, they brought up Babe Ruth. He struck out more than 99% of other major league players, but, he kept on swinging, and that's the key to his success. Or the best salesperson misses more sales than 90% of other salesmen, but that's because he has to give up more sales to make more. And so It's not really about the amount that you're losing. Well, you're always going to have to lose something to gain. Failure is a natural path to success.
Yeah, we've talked about this so often on the podcast, and it just seems to be a reoccurring thing in almost every book we read is, how important it is to fail successfully. I think I like that the way you put that, successful failures, because I think there is a difference. I think we can fail and not learn something from it, or fail stupidly, making dumb decisions, or we're not actually trying to do something important. We're just making dumb life choices.
Yeah, it's kind of like losing a football game and not watching the tape to figure out why you lost. You just keep losing, and there's no reason. Well, that's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, but I like how you put it, how there's successful failures, and that's when you like almost intend to fail by trying to succeed, but then you obviously fail, and then you have to fail countless times in order to succeed.
Right. And if you don't continue to fail, like you just stop, well, you're not getting to success because, as the book put it, failing as in permanent failure is the line of least persistence. I liked how it said that.
Yeah. So if you're not persistent, then you're going to fail permanently, or you're just going to fail, period.
Right. It's the persistence that's the key.
So you keep failing persistently, and eventually you like break free from the failures and you start succeeding. And then you keep making failures, but eventually you do succeed. My favorite principle in the book was about goals.
Yes, this was good.
He mentioned in the book, can you imagine Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to climb Mount Everest, explaining how he was able to accomplish that feat? Suppose he had explained that he was just walking around one day when he happened to find himself at the top of the tallest mountain in the world. And that's how I think a lot of people unconsciously think about successful people. They think, oh, they were born with certain talents. They're just good because they're good. And they just kind of ended up there for no reason other than, sure, they put in the work, but it's actually kind of a ridiculous thing to say. Like, you can't accomplish anything without having a goal. And people overcomplicate it. A goal is just a destination that you set, that you say, I want to do that. It's just, that's all it is. But people think of it like you get something just by kind of walking into it. Like, people say, I'll keep my options open. I'll get there one day. But you don't unless you make a set goals.
Yeah. So you got the factor of you don't set goals, or you set goals that are too big. Like, I do this all the time. And the book was talking about how to go big, you really have to go small. which is so weird. Like it said, look just 3 days out for your goals and try to pull that off in one day. Isn't that a whole lot easier than trying to like meet your whole life goal this week? You know, and we get so discouraged because we're not making it because we're trying to look way too far ahead. What if we just looked at like the one thing book? What's the most important thing today that would knock out what I would have to do in the next 3 days? And then you just keep doing that the next day. And then you're at 6 days. And on the third day, you're at 9 days. And think about how that multiplies.
It would, definitely. I'm still working on doing my one thing, which is not cold calling, but calling up leads that I have. And it seems like I always have something else to do first. But anyway, one tip that I have for that, like you're saying, just making small goals, is set reminders on a reminder app. I'm surprised like how few people do this, but if you have an iPhone, I'm sure Android has it too, but you have a reminder app. I set little reminders because if I don't,
it doesn't happen.
I found that, yeah, if I don't write it, if I don't set a goal, I don't do it. But if I do write it down, I always do it. It's crazy. I've even looked back a few times now at some goals I wrote like a year ago, and they all like happened. And it's weird. It's I even forget that I set the goals, and then I just did, and I do something, and I'm like, and then I forget like that I had set that goal, and then I look back and like, wow, I did set that goal, and that's why I'm doing this right now. But I would highly recommend to have a little app and just write down the things you need to do in there, because I like to put things off or change things, or I like to kind of make excuses or just kind of change my mind about something. But if I write it down, then I'm kind of forced to do it.
Yeah, and you're writing it down in a central location that you're seeing all the time. Every time you pick up your phone, which is the number one thing you pick up in a day probably, you see your goal. And you're like, what's the next thing I got to do to achieve that?
Yeah, I realize that I need to spend like a whole day or a couple days with my business partner just sitting down and writing goals and talking about the future. Because if I don't, I feel like, we just get caught up in the day to day and forget where we're actually headed. And we're never going to get somewhere if we just keep going, wandering around,
right,
doing the next little project. Because there's always tons of projects that we could do, but like what projects are actually the right ones? So you don't pick your projects or your day-to-day things to do that will then lead you to a certain goal. You have to, it's like reverse engineering it. You first have to pick your long-term goal, and then you set your day-to-day projects so that they work towards that. Otherwise, you're just, chasing the wind.
Yeah, you're going in circles until you really know what your goal is. And I like how the book said, when you know where you're going, you're already halfway there. It's very true, because we get so focused on what's the goal? And then once we finally have the goal, we're like, oh, now I just have to get there.
Yeah, he says some steps, which I don't follow all these. I should, man, it'd be great. But he says, so basically these are all things related to goals. Keep records of where you are, commit to paper goals, or I use a reminder app, but he says, be specific with your goals, like exactly how much, what you want, how much money you want in a few years or next month, or be like name specific things. You want to buy this car or whatever. He said, set big and difficult but reachable goals. Make a long range goal and then a like short term goal. So have, different lengths, time frames. Then actually think of obstacles that you're going to face. Break down the goal into, smaller and smaller increments. Then mentally prepare yourself to take the steps needed. Be convinced you can reach the goal. Visualize yourself reaching the goal before you start. So there's all these things that you can do that are almost guaranteed to let you achieve almost anything.
Yeah, on that visualization theme, when I was learning to fly, they talked about chair flying, which is a whole lot less expensive than getting into an airplane, cranking on the engine, and then flying, because the cockpit's one of the worst places to learn, they say, because you don't have all the pressure when you're sitting in a chair versus in a plane. And so when you're trying to learn something new, if you can learn it on the ground and kind of go play by play through it without the pressure and do that frequently, when you get up in the air, you'll perform a lot better. And I do this.
Wow.
I probably should do this more, but I've done this thinking about, I mean, obviously with flying. Actually, I just picked up a checklist for a Cessna 150, which I've never flown before, but I'm planning to do it in a couple weeks. And
Nice.
it has like all the speeds for best glide speed or approach speed or the procedures. What I'm planning to do is, having not flown that plane before, I'm going to sit in my chair probably this week and go through what's it like to start up a Cessna 150 before I actually do it, so that when I get to that point, it's not like this brand new checklist I haven't touched yet.
Yeah.
And ideally, I'll be better off that way.
Wow. So kind of visualizing or practicing, if you can somehow, how would you apply that to setting like a goal of, any goal that you'd want to achieve?
It could be like the cold calling book we just did. Like, make a tree of all the directions you think that cold call could go based on when you say hello, where could that go from there? Like in 10 different directions, then make this map of how you handle different situations in a cold call, like rehearsing for all of them ahead. And then you get there and it's like you're just moving through that matrix in your head. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be, I think writing down the obstacles that you might run into is a great idea. Like writing down all that stuff would kind of force you to do it. I have done this in the past, but I haven't done this for a while, of setting, very specific, big goals that seem impossible but achievable. Like I remember when I started my business, I never, it seemed impossible that I would have a business that is self-sustaining, or that would do say 50,000 a year. I remember thinking that would just be so incredibly it just seems impossible. But I'm pretty much at that place this year, and it's crazy to think about that. But I kind of believed it was possible, and then that leads into one of the other things in the book was desire, and how important it is to have an extreme desire. You can't just have the ability to do it. You have to actually really, really, really want to do it extremely bad, or you might as well not even try to do it. You can't just say, "Oh, I might do that in the future," or "I'll see how it goes." No,
you got to put your whole self into it, like totally invested. I loved how the book said, like, instead of an alarm clock in the morning, you call it an opportunity clock, and you shoot up out of bed, and you're super excited for the day. Even if you're not, you just say things that make you excited about the day, and then you sing loud songs in the shower, and then you go off into your day wildly enthusiastic, perhaps in a silly way, but it gets you in that mood that you can chase whatever that desire is so easily from there.
Wow, I could use that personally.
I could too. I don't do it. I'm very quiet in the morning, and I don't. Certainly the first thing I think of when I wake up is, oh man, my alarm already went off.
I know, man. I could definitely use that. Getting up and having desire in the morning, because I feel like we kind of lose it over time if we're not intentional about thinking about our goals and how badly we want something, or just stay motivated, stay positive. Otherwise, we just kind of eventually we'd rather sleep in, and I think that's kind of what's happened to me. I mean, I need to rework that desire, because it gets old eventually if you're doing the same thing, working towards a goal. You kind of forget the goal, forget what the goal was, and then you forget, and you lose your desire, kind of.
Yeah, which is why you got to keep the goals short term, like you were talking about.
Yeah, cool. Well, man, I've really enjoyed this book by Zig Ziglar.
Was a really good read. I'm so glad we did this. And if you want to get a book like this every single week, we do that here at Motivation Minute. Just tap the subscribe button on the feed if you haven't already.
Yeah. Our goal with the podcast is to read every single book that was ever written. Even though there's, thousands of new books every day, we need to read those as well.
Was that our goal?
Yeah, that was our goal.
Wow.
Every book.
We got to start small though,
Yeah, we got to start. We're doing one a week now. We're going to switch to one a day, and pretty soon we're going to be doing about 1,500 every day. Just to keep up with all the books.
Yeah, and barely keep up at that. I think we'll live in the Library of Congress.
Jokes aside, we've read so many books on this podcast already. I mean, over 50 in the last year, and I can't wait to read more,
So send your book ideas in to us. We'd love to read them at motivationminute.com. We also love it when you leave us reviews. Please follow us on Instagram at Motivation Minute Official. we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Sounds good. See you next week.